Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making a 3-oil soap, and each one of these oils you should be able to obtain at your grocery store. They're not hard to obtain. You're also going to need 100% lye, which you can get at any hardware store in their drain cleaner section. Now, the point of caution here is to make sure that you're getting 100% lye. Do not buy Drano, do not buy liquid plumber. We want 100% lye crystal, so it's going to be a dry powder, and this is very imperative because it's not going to work and it's going to be that much more dangerous if you get Drano. So anyway, so our 3 oils are going to be coconut oil, canola oil, and just straight lard, and you can buy that in your cooler section. Buy your butter, it'll be in a box like butter, but it's going to be lard. And anyway, so let's go ahead and get to it. I'm going to also teach you how to calculate how much lye to use in your soap. So anyway, let's get to it. Okay, first things first, I want to be able to protect my surface, because I just do this on my kitchen counter and I don't want my countertop to get ruined by lye or anything like that. So I cover it. My choice is to use plastic wrap underneath some wax paper just in case it seeps through the wax paper. I got the plastic to protect it. And it's easy, you just, crumple it up and throw it away. So cleanup is a breeze. So protect your surface if you're not using an industrial countertop or something like that. So anyway, I've got my scale, and make sure your scale reads in like ounces or grams if you prefer grams. This one I got years and years ago, and it reads in pounds and ounces only, and it's worked for me all these years. So I do ounces. And so the first thing I'm going to do is measure out my lard, which I did previously because I wanted to make sure I had enough. So sorry, I already weighed it. And it's about, well, with the container, it's about 5.7 ounces. So let's write that down here. I've got my, here, so you can see it. I got my lard is 5.7 ounces. And coconut. All right. So the next thing I'm going to measure out is my coconut oil, and I'm going to measure it directly in here with the lard. And what I want, again, is another 5.7 ounces. I don't know if you can see that number. Perfect. It's kind of warm out here in the Midwest right now, so my coconut oil is a lot more soft than usual. Okay, now let's write down our coconut number. We got another 5.7 ounces. All right. Okay, and now let's measure our canola oil. So I got this from Sam's. You can probably get it from Costco or some other big market, Walmart, whatever. I want to measure out 16.8 ounces. It's a lot. Come on, man. All right, it's a little over, but that's okay. It's only over by 1/10 of an ounce. Okay, so we've got 16.9 ounces. All right, so now we need to calculate our lye. And if you see on my sheet here, what I've got up here are the saponification numbers for these particular oils. And I looked this up on, I can't remember what website, but you can find it online. Just Google it, Saponification Numbers. And So for canola oil, I've got 0.1328, lard is 0.1399, coconut oil is 0.1900. And what these mean is this is a number, this is a constant for sodium hydroxide specifically. There's also one for potassium hydroxide, which is used for liquid soap, but we are looking for the NaOH, which is your sodium hydroxide. And what these numbers mean is specifically for sodium hydroxide, this is a constant that has been calculated based on the fatty acid chains that exist in each of these oils that will fully saponify with sodium hydroxide. So we want to do the math here. So what we did was we got, let's start with canola here. We have 16.9 ounces of canola, and we want to multiply by its constant. And I can't do this math in my head, so do this. So 16.9 times 0.1328, 2.24432. Okay, and we'll deal with rounding here in a minute. So now we've got lard, which we've got 5.7 ounces times 0.1399. So 5.7 times 0.1399 is 0.79743. Okay, and so for coconut, I think you get the drill here. We got 5.7 ounces times 0.1900. 5.7 times 0.19 is 1.083. Now what do we do with these numbers? Okay, so this is the amount of lye it's going to take to saponify canola oil. This is the amount of lye to saponify lard. And this for your coconut. And this is specific to your recipe, which in this case is 16.9 canola, 5.7 lard, and 5.7 coconut. So we're going to add all these numbers together. We've got, let's round these, so 2.24, and if you don't know the rules of rounding, if it's 5 or above, then you round up. If it's 4 and below, you round down. Okay, so we got 0.80, because we've got 797, so we'll do 0.8, and then 1.08, okay? So we add all these together, 2.24 plus 0.8 plus 1.08. We got 4.12 ounces of lye. So if we go with this number, what we're gonna get is 100% saponification. But you don't want that. What you want is a softer, gentler soap. If you completely saponify this, this is going to be very harsh soap. So what we do in the soaping world is we do a lye discount. And what that means is that we are going to use at least 5% less of this to make it a super fatted soap, so that it's a lot more, you know, like I said, soft and moisturizing. So in order to do that, if we want a 5% discount, what that means is we want to use 95% of this value. So we're going to take 4.12 and multiply by 0.95. This is your percent value that you want. So take this 0.95. We want 3.91 ounces of lye. Okay? All right. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you are confused about any of this, feel free to leave a comment below. So, in order to calculate the water that we need to dissolve this lye, what we do is we take 3.91 ounces of lye and multiply by 2. So we just want a 2-to-1 lye to water ratio. You can do a water discount, which if you're confident in your fragrance oil not accelerating your batch, or if you're confident in like your oils not reacting really fast or anything like that. Olive oil reacts really slow. So does canola oil. Coconut oil tends to work even slower than that if you're just using 100% coconut oil. But things like shea butter, they really speed up your batch. So with that being said, if you're using a water discount, that's going to accelerate it even more. So I typically use a small discount because I'm impatient. So let's go ahead and calculate this first. So 3.91, let's do our rounded value, 3.91 times 2. And we've got 7.82 ounces of water. And I'm going to use this full amount. I'm not going to discount it because I've never used this combination of oils, so I don't know how it's going to react. I'm going to be using this fragrance oil called Karma. I got it from Wholesale Supplies Plus. I like the way it smells, not so much out of the bottle, but once it's in soap, it smells to me like a fresh hotel soap, which I love hotel soap. I'm also going to be using this Sunday Funday mica powder, which I love yellow as well, so I'll make it a nice happy fun color. Alright, so let's get our recipe in order here. Well, I guess I didn't have to take that off. Alright, so we've got our canola, which was 16.9 ounces, coconut, which was 5.7, and lard, which was 5.7 as well. We've got our lye, which is 3.9 or 3.91, and our water, which is 7.8 ounces. Okay, the reason I'm only going to 1 decimal is because that's what my scale goes to. You can go out as far as you want depending on your scale. Okay, let's get rid of our math here. Don't need that. Okay. All right, this is how I melt my oils. I have a 2-quart pot full of, not full, but it's about an inch down below of water. And then I set this inside. And as I put it in there, the water comes up and meets the level of the oil. Okay. So while I measure my lye, I'm going to go ahead and let this melt down. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is measure out I'm going to make beer soap. Now, if you do this and you don't have beer prepped or anything like that, just use distilled water. It's totally fine. I want to use up these beer cubes that I have in my fridge or freezer. So actually what I have here, this is actually wine. So let's make some wine soaps. We're going to do our measure. We want 7.8 ounces. Okay, that's only 5.4, so I'm going to mix some of my Hefeweizen beer cubes in there with it. Oh, perfect. Look at that. All right. And if you haven't seen, I have a video on how to prepare beer for soap making, and I'll link that in the little card above so that you can see that as well. But like I said, just use water, distilled water, not spring water, not drinking water. You want distilled water because there are elements in water that react with lye, and distilled water is actually water that has been steamed and the steam has been collected and filtered, and that's distilled water. You also don't want to drink distilled water, so anyway, just use that for soap making. Okay, so now that we have everything measured out, I'm going to go ahead and measure out my lye. And first things first, I have my gloves on, and I also have, I've had this apron on this whole time, and I should have mentioned that, but I have an apron on to protect everything. So my gloves, all right. And we want 7.9 ounces of lye. And make sure, I think I have a potassium hydroxide. This is sodium hydroxide. That's what we want. You do not want to overmeasure your lye either, because we calculated this specifically to superfat our soap. In fact, if you undermeasure, that's even better. So I got 3.9 in here. I'm going to put my scale aside. And this is an exothermic reaction, so my solution is going to start melting. I'll show you. Now, if you're using distilled water, the distilled water is going to get very, very hot, so be very careful. That's why I make beer ice when I do this, so that I don't ruin the beer. Because if I just pour, well, you have to decarbonate it, but if it's decarbonated and it's just room temperature, your beer could burn. And that is true for anything that is not water. So like if you want to make a milk soap, or I've been thinking about making a yogurt soap. I used to make goat milk. You can see that the color is getting very orange. This is actually kind of cool, really. And that could have a lot to do with the wine that's in here, because I've never used wine in soap. So this is turning a very neat red. I wonder if that's going to come through in the soap. That would be cool. And that could have to do with the antioxidants that are in wine, which even though it was a white wine that I put in there, what is it, that resveratrol that's in there, when it undergoes chemical change, it might just change colors like this. It smells pretty good though, to be honest. So anyway, I'm gonna let this, see, it's even hot. Even though I used ice cubes, it's still pretty hot. If you don't have this on hand, that is completely fine. You can do without it, but I like to have a little sodium lactate in my lye solution, because what it does is it just firms up the edges of my soap and just creates a smoother bar. So all I do is add like half a capful to this. And to explain the numbers that we used as far as creating this recipe, I have a 2-pound mold, and I should have explained this in the beginning too, so I apologize for that. But the 2-pound mold is, I'll show you, the one that I typically use, and the amounts of soap plus the lye plus the water, all the stuff will come together in this amount, and that's what you want. So I calculated these, or I came up with these oil concentrations specifically for how much is going to go into that loaf. But also, the reason I'm using more canola oil versus, say, coconut oil or lard is because of the oil profile that canola oil has. I used to use a lot of olive oil, but olive oil has been getting really expensive, so I've been using canola oil. And it, to me, as far as a soap consistency and everything, it is pretty comparative, in my opinion. And I actually like it better than the olive oil soaps, because they're not as soft and mushy. So anyway, but the coconut oil is there to harden up your bar and give it nice, big, fluffy lather. The lard also makes a nice hard white bar, but some people are averse to using animal fats, which I totally understand. But the lard that I used in this recipe was the stuff that I took off my bacon fat, which I also have a video on, which I'll link in the little card up here too, if you want to see that video. But if I'm going to eat the bacon, I want to use all of it anyway, so I saved the oil, or the fat drippings, and preserved them for soap, which people did in the old days anyway. So anyway, I'm gonna let this cool down and wait for my oils to melt. It shouldn't take long, since, you know, it's kind of warm and most of the recipe is canola oil. So hold on just tight. Now, as I wait for my oils to melt, which it's almost there, so I should be able to take this off soon, I'm gonna go ahead and measure out my fragrance oil. Now, typical rule of thumb is to use 1 ounce per pound of oils, And even though this is a 2-pound soap mold, I'm not using 2 pounds of oils. I'm using a combination of oils and water and lye, so it comes out to be, how much was our total here? It's more than a pound, but it's not 2 pounds. So I'm going to measure out about 1.5 ounces of fragrance, and I may not have that in here, so I'll just use what I have. Yeah, I only have 0.8, and to me, that's totally fine. If I had like 0.2, I might use a different oil, but 0.8, it's like almost halfway there. I think it should be fine. And this is kind of a stronger fragrance. You can see like it's kind of a thick color, or like a rich color. It's a little bit more potent. So 0.8 should be just fine. One thing I'd like to show you is that when you mix your lye and your oils together, you don't want them to be too far apart difference-wise in heat. So since this is a really hot process with the lye, I have it in a small ice bath right here to kind of cool it down a little bit. Because this process, this exothermic reaction, can get up to like 200 and over boiling basically, if you know, so if you're not careful. So I want to try to bring this down. What I have here, which you may not have this handy, but that's okay. I did this for years without it. It's a infrared thermometer. So it's telling me my lye solution is about 140 degrees. That's actually not too bad. But if you don't have one of those on hand, they're really cheap. You can get it on Amazon. I think I got mine for like 10 bucks. But I did this for years without it, and I did it by touch. So you can do that too. Just be very careful in touching anything. I recommend using plastic. You can use glass for your lye. Heat transfers a lot quicker on glass, so if you touch the outside of it, it's going to be a lot hotter than if you were to touch plastic. But on the other hand, if you're putting it in an ice bath with that heat transfer, it's going to cool down faster. So it's up to you. Just be very careful touching it no matter what you use. So yeah, let's see where we're at here. We've gone down almost 10 degrees, so that's good. The ice bath is working. Okay, now I have my oil solution, and when I was talking earlier about touch, this is what I mean. So if you're touching the sides and it still feels pretty hot, which this does, well, let's see, stir it around. Sometimes if you stir it around, it changes. Yeah, so this is about 130 something degrees. I prefer my oil solution to be kind of clear before I use it. This is a little bit murky, which is probably due to some of the undissolved solids that are in the lard, because the lard, I made it, it wasn't commercially manufactured or anything like that, so there could be just some undissolved solids in there, and it's totally fine. It's not going to affect your soap at all. So we know this is about 130 something. This has probably gone down a little bit even since last time I measured it. At 125. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out and kind of let them both come down on their own terms for probably about 10 minutes. So I have a quick change that I made here. Instead of using the yellow mica, I'm going to be using the silver mica, and the reason for that is because I didn't anticipate my lye solution being this dark. It's totally fine. I don't think the yellow will come through, and there's no point in using a colored mica if your soap is going to be dark. So I wanted sparkle in there, so I'm going to be using silver. So silver is going to add that sparkle, but the sparkle is going to be kind of whatever this color ends up being, and it'll be lighter than that for sure. But it's not going to be a white soap, that's for sure. Now these oils are starting to come down. It's about 130 right now. It's definitely a lot slower if you just let it sit out. But I feel like I prefer my oils to be around 120, but I think since these are so close, it should be okay. I've done it at hotter temperatures before, so I'm not particularly worried about it. So I'm not measuring this, I'm just kind of tapping it in there because I'm kind of lazy and I don't want to get a spoon. But I recommend getting a teaspoon and measuring out maybe 1 or 2 teaspoons of your mica if you're using it. You don't have to use it by any means, and mix it in that way. And it mixes really well with your oils. See how well it went in there? Just kind of, and then once we hit it with our stick blender, it'll really disperse. Okay, are you ready to mix this together? I'm going to get rid of this spatula and use this other spatula. So I have my lye solution, my oil solution, and my fragrance waiting at the ready. Sometimes people use their fragrance oil and mix it in with their oils before they mix the lye in, which you can do, but since I don't know how this is going to react, I don't want to do that. Well, I guess I do kind of know how it's going to react, I just don't really remember. All right, so we're going to slowly pour our lye down our spatula to prevent splashing. Okay. I want to get it all out because we carefully measured this. So we want to make sure that it behaves how we want it to, or how we can reasonably predict. Okay, give it a nice stir. Ooh, that's really pretty with that silver mica. Once I mix it though, it's gonna change colors. It's pretty for now. All right. And if you don't have a stick blender, that's okay. It's just gonna take a lot longer. You can use a whisk. I'm gonna mix in my fragrance now. And what you're looking for is you don't want to see these like oily lines anymore. It's kind of hard to distinguish them between the mica, but you can kind of, if you look at it at an angle with the lights shining on it, you can see the oiliness of the line. Now you can see it's getting thicker. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is pour this in my mold. Okay, got my mold here. On my dirty cookie sheet that I use only for soap making. Okay. It smells really good. You see, that's the perfect amount for this mold anyway. Funny thing is, I originally thought I would make this, use an orange mica to make this soap. And it ended up being orange anyway. But I like it. Orange is actually my favorite color. So I want to smooth out the top. And what I'm going to do is let this kind of sit for a little bit. I want it to kind of harden up just a little bit because I want to make a texture with a fork in the top, which this is totally optional. Right now what you can do is set your oven to 170 degrees, set it in there for about 5 minutes, and then turn your oven off and just let it sit in there. You probably heard my oven go off because that's what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna kind of let it firm up a little bit. It may firm up better in the oven, which I'll probably go ahead and do that instead. Okay, my soap is firmed up just a little bit in the oven, so what I'm going to do is just create a little texture on the side. And that's it. Super easy. but whenever it comes out, whenever I cut it, it's gonna have this cool, might make it a little wavy, this cool textured element on top. Okay, I like it. Back in the oven. All right, so after letting it sit in the oven for about 5 minutes and then turning the oven off, and then I just left it in there overnight, now it's a good hard consistency that we can cut it now. So see how it releases from the mold, super easy. And I got my little cutting board here. And usually when I cut these, I just freehand it because that's just what I do. And I use a pretty big knife. So I use this. So if you're using something like this, just be very careful. I know we're all adults here, but you can never be too careful about things like this. So I like to cut it at about 1 inch. And just try to be as straight as possible, cutting all the way down. Otherwise you end up with like wedges. This is cool. So the inside here is a different color because what's happening is the outer portion is oxidizing, I guess, and it's creating a different color. So as this dries, this will turn into this color. So it's a lot more orange and a little bit more brown on here. So, and you can't really see it in here, but there is that sparkle in there. And it's more apparent when you're actually using it, so that is cool. So we're just gonna go ahead and cut the rest of this, and I'll just speed it up.
So just in case you wanted to know, I'm going to go ahead and list these on my Etsy page whenever they're ready. So if you're interested in purchasing one of these bars in particular, they'll be on my Etsy site in a couple weeks.
So I did a decent enough job cutting these or eyeballing these, because with a loaf like this, you typically end up with about 8 equal-sized bars, and that's exactly what I ended up with. So these, since the oven trick, usually what that does is it causes your soap to be ready faster. Not tremendously faster. I mean, you still have to wait a couple weeks, but it hardens it a little bit faster and just kind of sets it, because what it did was the heat from the oven forced it to go through gel phase, and the gel phase is what kind of forces it to saponify to completion. And if it didn't go to completion, instead of seeing this oxidation ring, you'll see like a ring in the center that's like circular, because only the middle gelled and it didn't go all the way out to the sides. This one went all the way out to the sides. I can see it's a little bit more translucent than if you were just to let it sit and not go in the oven. So anyway, there you have it. You see like your little texture here. They're like little fingers coming up from the top. It's kind of cool and gives it a little bit of a visual interest, and you know, you can do whatever you want with that kind of texture, or if you want to make like cross hatches or something. But anyway, so that's that, and I hope you enjoyed this little soap along, and let me know in the comments if you want to have another one like this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.